Welcome back. Supreme Court Shenanigans. The recent Supreme Court term just ended this past week and left us with some headline rulings that have altered the political scene. From affirmative action to President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. We'll talk about the thinking behind these rulings, the impacts of them, what this means for President Biden's agenda, and more. Plus, I'll be joined by State Representative Nabeela Syed to talk about the recent headlines, her work this past session in the Illinois General Assembly, and her plans for 2024 with an exciting announcement exclusive here on the Ishan S. Show. We'll be taking a look at those stories and more today, July 7th, 2023. From Ishan Media, this is the Ishan S. Show, a podcast about the interesting and ever-changing world of American politics. With me, your host, Ishan. Hello. Welcome back to the Ishan S. Show. We are finally back from our very long hiatus. Let me tell you, it has been too long. I am so happy to be back here today to talk about our favorite headlines and our favorite topic, politics. You know, it's been so hectic for me these past few weeks, past couple of months, really. And it's been so long, I lost practice of how to use my recording equipment. I mean, I may sound pretty bad right now because I have no idea how to use this stuff, and I've totally forgotten. So that should just go to show how long it's been. But it's been a really eventful summer for me so far, and I really hate that I've been on a hiatus this long, but we're back. No, I did not abandon you just for, I didn't abandon you for no reason this time. I actually have an interesting piece of news for me that you might have already heard about because I did promote it on the show's Instagram accounts, but I am officially a published author. Very exciting stuff. I wrote a book. It's called Saving Crescents. It's a novel. It's about two public servants. Their names are Bertha York and Neil Denmark, who are adamant, dedicated public servants who are all about saving their country from a fall to autocracy. I know, it's a very political book in nature. And I spent so long writing this book, and I tried to pitch it to so many publishers. Actually, it's funny to think about, but the people that published my book, person is Aiden Brands. You might recognize that name because he was actually a guest here on this show earlier this year. He reached out and we talked about publishing my book, and one thing led to another, and here we are. I'm officially a published author, and you can buy my book on aidenbrands.com. You can also get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and it's on Walmart's website, and some people have even been selling it on eBay already. So, it's all out there, and it's been such an honor for me to be able to write this book. And I'm so happy that I have this podcast as a platform, and now I have the book as well to share what it is that runs through my mind to all of you in the world. I just continue to prosper from your support, and I'm so humbled to have it. So please continue to do what you do, and you can buy the book. Just as a reminder, it's called Saving Crescents. I'll link all the fun stuff about the book down in the details of this episode, so you can go check that out when you're done listening to this great episode we have here today. But let's get into this week's topic. So many of you, I'm sure, have heard by now, the Supreme Court just wrapped up its most recent term last week. And with its most recent term comes a lot of interesting rulings that have left our already polarized country even more polarized. And I think that's just the track that our Supreme Court has been going down the past few years. In the most recent decade, we've been going down even more polarizing rulings every year. So for a quick reminder for my friends who don't quite know, the Supreme Court of the United States is the highest court in the land and is responsible for making sure that laws and policies are within constitutional bounds and do not exceed the standards set by the Constitution or federal law. And the Supreme Court has been pretty notable in its recent rulings, especially thanks to a conservative supermajority. That's thanks to President Donald Trump, who got to, in his 4-year term, appoint 3 Supreme Court justices onto the court. Those would be Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett. You might recall last year we were talking about the Supreme Court. Last time I think we talked about them was when they overturned the landmark Roe v. Wade decision, which resulted in abortion access no longer being constitutionally protected. And we discussed that to an extent on this show, but we also covered it on the Political News blog. But I think that is probably the most relatable piece of news that we have gotten from the Supreme Court that I think most of my listeners are going to understand. But that's kind of what this court has been doing, and that's what the power it has. We have not really had any rulings that have been that major this year, but we've had a few notable ones that have sent some shockwaves. So let's get into some of those. I first want to give a brief synopsis of what exactly the ruling said, and then we'll do some analysis because they all kind of fit in together, okay? So the first ruling I want to talk about is affirmative action. Now, affirmative action is basically a policy aimed at, quote, promoting equal opportunity and diversity in areas such as education and employment. It basically gives preference to people for certain qualities or things about them that would factor into their admission into an institution. I don't know if that really made sense because I think I just gave an even more complicated definition. But that's affirmative action. I'm sure most people are familiar with it. But this case, it was brought before the Supreme Court. It was regarding the education part of it. It was led by groups that were challenging Harvard and the University of North Carolina's admissions processes. Essentially, this ruling reversed years of precedent that and basically ends a college's ability or any university's ability to consider race as a factor in deciding qualified applicants and admitting them into their institutions. The court's conservative majority wrote that the admissions process needs to be, quote, colorblind and should follow more standard criteria in admissions without considering facts like race. Now, I would say that the Supreme Court has once again showed its conservative leanings here because it has always been a pretty big topic, affirmative action. It's just never made it up to the court. It finally did make it up recently, and that's why we see more conservative leanings being shown here, because affirmative action is something that has been opposed to by conservatives, specifically more white conservatives, as well as other people cite the Asian American community as well. I mean, there are people out there, sure, all who oppose this, and it mainly fits in with the conservative ideology to not have preference-based admissions in these types of programs. So this ruling really showed that, because affirmative action has effectively been reversed, and it's no longer a policy of the land, and it's not permitted either. So the court's 3 liberal justices, those are Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, delivered some scathing indictments of the majority opinion, saying, quote, the court subverts the constitutional guarantee of equal protection by further entrenching racial inequality in education, the very foundation of our democratic government and pluralistic society, end quote. Liberals, of course, are going to be against this because this is a policy that they have championed for so long. Just as Ketanji Brown Jackson, the latest justice, said, quote, with the let them eat cake obliviousness today, the majority passes around and announces colorblindness for all by legal decree and deeming race irrelevant in law. It doesn't make it so. Just because they do it there doesn't mean they do it in life. I totally butchered the quote because my script was not written properly, so I might have butchered the quote a little, but the point she's making is you can get rid of racial inequality out of the education system by saying it doesn't exist, but that doesn't actually remove it from real life. Justice Jackson has been a strong proponent of affirmative action. I still remember her Senate hearings and her confirmation hearings where this was a big topic being discussed. The court's only other African American justice, Justice Clarence Thomas, who has admitted that he benefited from affirmative action in his own admission to college, clashed with Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson over the topic. Both of them hold starkly opposing viewpoints, and they were the ones that many people were watching when it came to this decision. And, it got dirty between both sides of this, the liberals and the conservatives going at each other. But the next case was a ruling that specifically impacted the LGBTQ community here in the United States. The case involved a wedding web designer who did not start her business yet. She was a person aspiring to start a business, but she hadn't started one yet, but was coming out in opposition to a Colorado law which forbid her from denying services to people who she did not feel she could produce proper work for, in this case for her same-sex couples for weddings. Her entire argument was that because web design is a form of free speech, she should not have to serve customers for whom she cannot make a proper work for, or for whom she would have to design websites that would go against what she believes in. Mind you, she hasn't even started her business yet, so she hasn't actually done anything. She hasn't been asked to do anything. Anyway, the court ruled on Friday that this lady indeed did have a constitutionally protected right to deny service to people who she did not believe she could provide proper services for. Now, the court has built its argument mainly off the fact that something like web design is a form of free speech. So if she would have to fit specifically with same-sex weddings, that is something she, again, would not be able to serve the customer for, so she wouldn't have to provide the service. Many people have been saying that this is giving a green light for discrimination. What the courts, not just the court, but conservatives in general, are saying is that it doesn't extend to everything. The analogy that I saw from someone on CNN, I can't remember who, was saying at a wedding, this web designer wouldn't have to do it, but maybe for like chairs and stuff, that's not art, that's not free speech. They would still have to provide the chairs. So it's not like a total block, but of course that is a concern that still we are seeing from the other side. On the flip side, the lady who brought this case has been saying that it's a win for free speech and liberty because people in her line of business don't have to serve customers for whom they cannot agree with on a fundamental level. And then the last case that I want to talk about was expected, but it was regarding President Biden's student loan forgiveness program. It was a nearly $400 billion program that cancels student loan debt up to $20,000 for a lot of Americans, about 16 million. The court basically ruled against it, struck it down, so basically what happened was President Biden canceled all the student loan debt, citing a law from back in I think it was after 9/11 that it was passed, that could be utilized during a national emergency to lower interest rates on student loans or to alter student loans in a way that would be able to fit the needs of the American people during that emergency. President Biden cited COVID-19 as the emergency and therefore canceled up to $20,000 for 16 million Americans. Nearly 20 million applied. I believe they were all approved for the program, but the challenges were led by two Republican attorneys general, and it made its way to the high court. With it being struck down, it's a pretty big blow to President Biden, who really wanted this policy to go through, especially as he gears up for re-election, because he was going to run on the platform of promises made, promises kept, but this ruling does further complicate that because now people are going to have to start paying. I think it's starting in October. People are going to have to start paying money. Although the Biden administration is right now introducing and rolling out some new policies to help relieve that. But of course, it's still a complication that I think we really need to understand. And it's a failure on the Biden administration's part because they have just lost a really big part of the president's platform. And I mean, of course, it's not their fault, but promises made, promises kept is what they're running on. But those are the three cases I wanted to look at. Now let's talk about the impact of it. I have said it plenty of times before, this court with a 6-3 conservative majority is taking complete advantage of its majority power. It's basically an activist court. What is an activist court, you might ask? Basically, an activist court is one that generally loves expanding or heavily impacting laws and policies. The opposite would be judicial restraint. That's where you are restraining from doing this, refraining from doing stuff like that. We saw this very well with the Supreme Court ruling overturning Roe v. Wade, and we're seeing it again, and we're going to see this for a while. And it's because of Donald Trump. You know, if Hillary had won the election, I think we would have been talking about the liberal supermajority. But the point is that Donald Trump won. He got 3 justices on that court. And as a result of it, Republicans have been seeing win after win with the court. Essentially, conservatives have control of one branch of government for a long time. And it's showing right now because President Biden lost a pretty big campaign promise with the student loan program. We've also lost affirmative action. And there's countless rulings like this where we are seeing more and more of this court from my liberal friends in the audience that you're probably going to have to deal with for a while, because the latest justices on the court, 4 of them are fairly young, and 3 of them are conservatives out of the 4 newest ones. So, you know, it's going to be like this. And we don't have to be happy with it, but that's just how the highest court rules. And I know it's frustrating for a lot of people, especially with the types of rulings they make. I'm not gonna say what I think of them, because that's not what I'm supposed to do. But I would say that judicial activism is not necessarily the best thing for a court, like ours. I think that we're supposed to follow the Constitution in a manner where we are expanding. If we are expanding, and if we want to be activists, we should expand liberty to more people, as opposed to take it away. But one person who I think is definitely happy from all of these rulings is Donald Trump. And it's because 6-3, that's a huge legacy maker. And he's running on a platform like that. Like right now in the Republican primary, they all talk about abortion. Nikki Haley's saying, I would sign a 15-week abortion ban. Mike Pence has turned his entire campaign into something about abortion. But in the end, you can look to Donald Trump because he gets all the credit for this conversation even happening. Because if he didn't appoint Barrett, Kavanaugh, or Gorsuch, this would not be a discussion we would be having right now. And so this is, big, and it's a pretty big deal for Donald Trump. And because there have been so many instances where this might have not happened, it just goes to show Donald Trump's campaigning ability, because this is, if all else fails, he has this. Because think about it again, with the people on this court, President Obama was denied the opportunity to appoint Merrick Garland in 2016. They put Gorsuch in then. Republicans rammed through Amy Coney Barrett's appointment between October and November 2020, right before the election, which went against their own reasoning for nominating Gorsuch, because they said that it's an election year, we have to give the American people the right to choose, blah, blah, blah. But then they ignored the same thing when it came to Amy Coney Barrett. But in the end, I think liberals across the country are just going to have to contend with a Supreme Court that does not serve them. I know that there are talks about expanding the court packing and all of that has been increasing as a result of these rulings. I still don't think those are realistic, because that is something that completely alters the court and in court, judicial independence. But that is not going to work in this day and age in terms of like actually facilitating it, getting it through Congress. And if it's prone to changes like this, I just wonder how it might impact the independence of this court. But of course, we're going to see and continue to see efforts to expand the court, to see changes to it. And we will keep you posted here on the Sean S. Show on all those topics. Subscribe to the Political News blog. All right. We are running out of time, but that was a look at the Supreme Court's most recent ruling, Supreme Court Shenanigans, after their term and what they did. When we come back, I will be joined by State Representative Nabeela Syed to talk politics, her work in the state legislature, and her plans for 2024 with an exclusive announcement. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. All right, so we're back. Now, our guest for today's episode is familiar with the show. She's been on with us before. She was just elected to the Illinois General Assembly and wrapped up her first session in the Illinois House. We are joined today by State Representative Nabeela Syed. Nabeela, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. And not only am I familiar with the show, but I am also a big fan. So always a pleasure to be here.
Happy to hear that. But I want to get straight into our interview today. I want to first go right to a headline
coming out of Lake County, which is right in your district. Nearly 1,200 families have no access to water after an accident there. People cannot flush their toilets. People cannot take showers. People don't have access to reliable drinking water. What is the situation out in Lake County right now that you can report to us? And what has your office been doing to address this issue? What do you want people out there, because we have listeners out there, what would you want them to know about this crisis?
Thank you for asking that, because that is the biggest issue that we're dealing with here in the 51st district. So certain neighborhoods in Killdeer and in Hawthorne Woods, 1,200 households, as you mentioned, are dealing with having access to absolutely no water or little to no water pressure. As of right now, water access has been regained for everyone, we're being told. There are going to be some instances where water is shut off for certain neighborhoods to fix smaller leaks, but those should just be temporary and just for a few hours. But this past weekend, we started receiving emails about people not having access to water, people with, a husband reached out to me about his wife, and she's 9 months pregnant, and they're trying to figure out how they can flush the toilets and take care of their other kids. People came into our office it was Wednesday morning, July 5th, and at least over 20 residents came into our office frustrated and just upset and desperate because they haven't had water for 3 days at that point, and they were going on the fourth day. And those areas gets water service from Aqua Illinois, which is a private water utilities company. So in my capacity as a state representative, I was trying to figure out what we could do on the government side to help alleviate some of this issue for people. And Aqua is working to get pallets of water to residents, but there was some mishaps in communication. Certain neighborhoods said that they weren't hearing about this communication, so they didn't know that water was being provided somewhere else. And these municipalities are fairly small in nature. So
yeah,
we're just trying to navigate a long-term solution to how we could fix this issue, how we could prevent it from ever happening again, because having access to no water for nearly 5 days is such a terrible thing. And it was made clear by so many residents. So I just want to say thank you to all the residents that reached out to us, because they were incredible advocates for their own families, but even their neighbors that were not able to come out to our office, even their neighbors that were not able to send emails. So just very grateful for how the community came together in these moments.
And State Senator Dan McConchie, who also represents that area, is calling for a full-scale investigation into what is happening. Would you back something like that?
100%. I think we need a full-scale investigation. I think we need to demand answers about some of these. There's strong discrepancies between what some of the residents are telling us and what Aqua is telling us. And it's tough because it's a private company and the government only has limited oversight over it, little to none. And residents very much want a long-term solution. So I'm committed to exploring what we could do in the future.
Okay, well, we're hoping for the best for Lake County and the neighborhoods affected. And thank you to you for all the work that you've been doing and getting the word out there. And for our listeners out there, please seek help if you are still affected, although what we are hearing is, yes, people are getting their water. So we're happy to hear that. But let's switch gears a little. I want to get to your work this past session in the General Assembly. For some of our listeners who don't know, this year the General Assembly crafted a budget, always a big deal, came up with new rideshare rules, privacy, among other things, and specifically Representative Syed has worked on improving voter access and improving drug prices for prescription drugs. So Representative, walk us through what your freshman year in the General Assembly has been like, what it's been like at on the front lines, making these deals, trying to get your legislation across. What does it feel like? And how do you think this is going to impact your constituents and our state?
After leaving Springfield, after we voted on that budget, we had a late night there. I felt very happy with the work that we were able to accomplish in my first legislative session. There were moments where, from the beginning to the middle to the end, where it's like an endless stream of knowledge. Like that's your information. You're constantly learning new information, constantly learning how Springfield works, how the legislative process works. And the learning curve is the curviest curve I've ever seen in my life. So I very much enjoyed navigating that process. There were moments where I was like, I'm trying to figure this out. I really want to get this done, and I'm struggling, and I very much lean on my colleagues. And for one of those, on my colleagues and also advocates that are advocating for these issues down in Springfield. And one of those bills that gave me a lot of grief, but a lot of happiness too, and passing was House Bill 3957, which prohibits price gouging of generic and off-patent drugs under certain conditions. And we've seen price gouging of drugs like Daraprim, erythromycin, EpiPens, drugs that are necessary for people to live, that could be life-saving drugs. And Daraprim, for example, increased in price from $13.50 for a pill to $720 for a pill overnight.
Wow.
Because of the greediness of Martin Shkreli and some of these drug manufacturers. And the biggest issue for my 51st district is prescription drug affordability across the board. The property taxes is definitely up there, and then it's also prescription drug affordability among Republicans, Democrats, Independents, because no one should have to suffer from high drug prices for drugs that they need to live. So I went in determined to get something done in that arena, and I didn't know what it would look like. It feels like, it was a significant uphill battle, but I'm very proud to have delivered that for the district, to have run on an issue and to have helped, contribute to improving all the concerns that exist in some of the concerns that exist in the prescription drug space. So that was awesome.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it. But looking ahead to the next session, I want to get your reaction to some of the Supreme Court rulings that we've had in the past few weeks with all the stuff they've been talking about, the issues such as affirmative action, as well as President Biden's student loan forgiveness program have all been on the docket, and they've issued a lot of rulings. And now this kind of leaves it up to states to really work on these issues to help their constituents. A lot of your colleagues have already come out condemning some of the stuff or praising it for all that matter. But what do you think in the upcoming session you might be doing or your colleagues might be doing to help in reaction to the Supreme Court's most recent rulings as it pertains to all the stuff they've discussed?
I am deeply disappointed with the direction the Supreme Court has been going in. And we saw that with Roe v. Wade. We saw when that was overturned, the impact that it had on all of America. There was a huge reaction to our reproductive health care rights being stripped away. And the reaction was either in electoral politics, how some of the races played out. It contributed to my victory because people cannot understand why the Supreme Court insists on taking away our rights. And I think that's what we're going to see again, not just in terms of the next election, but in terms of legislative priorities, as you mentioned. There has been a lot done to, based off a false story to green light discrimination. One of the Supreme Court cases, and affirmative action, like a complete dismissal of it makes me so frustrated thinking about it, because I feel like when I was at Friend, these are some of the arguments I'd get into in debates I'd get into with my peers about affirmative action, about the way that it impacts Asian Americans. And it has been very frustrating to see the way that, I'm figuring out how to phrase this, but it's been very frustrating to see that we've had this precedent set for years, and a precedent that would strive for more equity for Black and Brown communities. And by no means is affirmative action perfect, and we need to work on making it more perfect. However, completely stripping it away is not the way to go. We need to fight for more equitable society, economy, and it frustrates me that we continue to the Supreme Court is, we could criticize the Supreme Court and how they're in power all we want to, how long they're in power, but how they're able to make decisions for the entire country that severely pull us back. So a lot of frustration, a lot of emotion surrounding it. And I do expect that we'll see something. I'm not exactly sure what it'll look like in terms of legislation, but Illinois as a state was very good to respond to our reproductive health care rights being attacked. But then it also creates that issue of we are one of the few states in the Midwest, the only state, I would say in some cases in the Midwest,
Right.
that is continuing to fight these tough battles. And I would love to see us get some more support federally for fighting these battles too.
And looking beyond that, just beyond all the Supreme Court stuff, what do you think are other legislative priorities that maybe you do want to focus on come next year when you're back in session?
There have been many constituents that have come to us, and that's the best part of going into the next legislative session. Is before I was running for office at this point last year, so I wasn't planning for the next legislative session. I was trying to win my election, but now I have the opportunity to hear from residents, hear about what's concerning them and try to make legislation based off that. So prescription drug affordability is still something I'm very interested in. I feel like I caught the bug and I want to keep going. I definitely want to explore how we could support people with developmental disabilities and how we can make it easier for families to be caretakers for people, how we can better support students who are receiving IEPs. Illinois ranks very poorly in supporting people with disabilities, unfortunately. And I think that's an area where we need to put a lot of work behind. But then, of course, there are smaller issues. Many young people in the community have brought forth legislative ideas too, and it's very exciting to have those meetings and to be able to think through some of these concerns that they're bringing up and how we can legislate on their behalf.
Nice. So we'll stay tuned for that. We still have a few more months until we get there, but we'll be paying attention and we'll see what you guys do. But lastly, to wrap things up, I don't know how much you've been discussing this, how much you've been looking at it, but I know it's a question a lot of people want to ask you and have been asking. 2024 is around the corner. We are seeing a lot of people, even in your own area, announcing their candidacies. Is 2024 those discussions you're having right now for re-election? Is that something you've already decided on? Is there potentially an announcement you want to make here on the show?
Okay, I'll make it on the show. Yes, I'm planning on running for re-election.
Oh, wow.
And I'm very excited to do so. I think this past legislative session, we were able to accomplish a lot, and I want to be there as long as I'm being effective. And I do believe this past legislative session, I've learned a lot, I've grown a lot, and I've navigated how to legislate on behalf of my district and my community. So I'm excited to seek re-election. I love the Illinois House, and with all of its flaws and good parts and everything, I want to contribute to making Illinois government a better place for the future.
And I guess in this next campaign, you will be an incumbent. So what do you think you're going to have around this time in this election in terms of experiences or maybe a bigger target on your back? What do you think is going to be different about this upcoming race as compared to maybe last year?
There will definitely be a target on my back. I think the difference is that I now have a record. I have votes that I am held accountable to. I have decisions I'm held accountable to, and I have bills that I've sponsored and that I've championed that I can talk about too. And I have that experience, and I'm excited to even go back. I'm going to the doors. I've been knocking on doors on our government side and just talking to folks about how our district office can help, letting them know about some of the things I've done in Springfield. And that has been one of the most rewarding things, because I'm seeing people I saw before and I'm able to say, this is what I've done. So I think now this with a re-election, I have that record to talk to people about, and it's a record I'm proud of, and that will be probably the biggest difference. And I fully know what I'm running for. Before I was like, I think I know what the job entails, and I'm excited about change potentially, but I don't know exactly what it looks like. Now I can speak a bit more clearly to it.
Well, I see. Well, Representative Syed, we are very close to running out of time. Are there any parting thoughts you'd like to share with my audience before I let you go?
Yeah, I would say that, we have had, if there are young people listening in the audience, we've had young people come into our office, talk about the legislative process. I just want to continue to encourage people to get involved in politics in this space. And that's something I admire so much about you, Sean, is how much you care about just knowing things and understanding how this world works. And it should be far more accessible and clear to people than it is. And please don't hesitate to reach out to our district office, to me, and to learn more about this. I know like a counselor at Friend recommended someone meet with me because she mentioned she might be interested in politics, and she's coming out to our office. So I just that's my parting thought. Please, young people, continue to get involved in politics. This is our space, and we need to demand that we are being represented.
You continue to do the work on the government side. We'll continue to do the work on our side over here. But Representative Syed, thank you for taking out the time. I know you're a very busy person with all the stuff that's going on. So thank you for taking out the time and speaking to my audience. We hope to have you back on soon.
Thank you so much, Ishan. Take care.
And so that does it for us here today at the Ishan S Show. If you liked my commentary, then go ahead and follow the Ishan S Show on Twitter and Instagram for breaking news posts and updates about the show. And if you want to learn more about political stories, then check out my political news blog on the IshanSshow.com and go ahead and subscribe to it. Do us a favor and share this episode and all your other favorite episodes with your friends and family. It's the best way for this show to grow and get more people listening to it. Thanks again for all your support, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.